Okay, this is day 33 in your packet, and as of right now in November, there are a couple of things that you can do, and then there's a couple of things that we don't quite know yet, but you can kind of work your way through it. So what's happening is a box is starting out with some initial velocity, and it's moving up the incline, slowing down until it reaches a maximum height, and then it's going to slide back down the ramp and speed back up. So this is the piece we can do. We can graph a position versus time, velocity versus time, and acceleration versus time graph based on that motion. So there's a couple of things we know. We know initially its position is going to start at 0. It's going to reach some maximum height, because what's happening is we have this velocity as it's going up the ramp, and it's going to slow down, slow down, slow down. Zeros aren't really slowing down. There we go. Until it comes to a stop for just one instant. And then it's going to turn around and go back down the incline, and it's going to speed up at the same rate that it went down. And so when our velocity is moving really fast, we're covering a lot. Our slope has to be really great. And then it's going to slowly reach 0 and taper off before then it turns back around and the velocity gets faster and faster and faster in the negative direction. And so we end up with that parabola like that. And at our height, it says to indicate that it's at its highest point at t0. And so that's this right here, right? That's where it's getting ready to turn back around at. For some instant, it's just 0. So our velocity, we've looked at these vectors here, and we can look at the slope on this graph here. We're starting at some really great velocity. At some point, we're going to be at 0, at some constant rate, meaning a straight line, and then it's going to turn around and increase its speed at that same rate, but in the negative direction. And so we end up with a straight negative slope. And that T0 position is there again at 0, right, where we are at our maximum height. So then finally our acceleration is just the slope of our velocity time curve, and it's a negative acceleration at some point down here, and then maybe about halfway it's at its acceleration. So that's a piece that you can do right now based on what we've talked about. The new piece then says, try it again, but this time assume that friction is present. So what we're going to find out when we start talking about dynamics is that friction is always opposing the motion. And so when it's moving up the ramp, friction is going in the opposite direction. And so what happens is the friction and the acceleration work together to slow the box down at a faster rate. If it's slowing down at a faster rate, it's covering less distance. And so going up the ramp, it might look, initially it's got that same starting velocity, but then as friction and acceleration act together against it, it's going to slow down pretty quick, and it's not going to make it very high. Next, when it turns around and goes down the ramp, because friction always opposes the motion, even though now acceleration is going with our velocity and the box should be speeding up, our acceleration is opposing it. It's going up the ramp. And so our box is still going to speed up, but it's not going to speed up quite as fast. It's going to take longer to cover that same distance. And so we might have, something like that. Okay, so when we graph it, initially our position is going to start out the same because we have that same starting velocity. But it's going to be kind of squished. We're not going to reach as high, and we're not going to cover as much distance. So it might look something like this with our maximum height occurring sooner. So then when we look at our velocity, this one's kind of interesting. We initially have some great velocity, just like how we started, and so it's going to be that same initial position. But then it's going to be slowing down faster in less amount of time. And so that means that the slope is going to be much steeper until it hits that 0, which again is our T0, our maximum height. And then it's going to take more time to speed back up because friction is now working against it, or maybe I should say still working against it. And so we're going to have a pretty gradual increase in velocity in the negative direction. So it might look something like that. So our acceleration then is the slope here, which is greater than our slope originally, still in the negative direction. And then it's a much more gradual slope and still negative. So this piece is going to come to us when we figure out friction and work with it.